In addition to that, I'm a filmmaker. I've got 4 or 5 films I've produced and 1 in post-production that I've directed. And on top of all of that, I'm also a con runner. I'm a director at RavenCon, and I'm a board member and director at Mysticon here. So one's in Richmond and one is in Roanoke, Virginia.
Easy for you, sir.
My favorite cons, Mysticon, obviously, home convention, and RavenCon I've been going to for years. And then I also love Congregate down in North Carolina. It's one of my favorite conventions of that size. I feel like those guys really nail it. I love coming here as well, but those would be my big 3, and then others as we go. I've been going to conventions since the year before Star Trek: The Next Generation came out. As a matter of fact, at my very first convention, I met DeForest Kelley and got to see a sneak preview of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Whoa.
I've been guesting at conventions off and on since the early 2000s. Started with fan groups and then moved on to my own stuff.
And you, sir.
Hi, I'm Ben Yalow. I started in '71. I've been to, right now I say over 900 conventions. It's probably closer to 1,000 at this stage because I haven't updated in a while. I've run a few hundred of them. I've chaired a bunch in size ranging from a 30-person Relaxacon to a 20,000-person WorldCon. I co-founded SMOFCon, which is an annual convention of con runners who get together every year to talk about how to do this better. It started out in the U.S. In fact, it started out not all that far from here. It started out in the D.C. suburbs. It was last month in Stockholm, and it will be in Lisbon next year.
We're worldwide.
Probably Cleveland the year after that.
Yeah, that's a come down. Come down there.
Choose where that is.
There's actually an active con running fandom in Cleveland. The current generation. The prior generation of Cleveland con runners, for the most part, has died out. And of course, the generation that put on the Cleveland WorldCon half a century ago has all died out. So I've been around and running conventions for a while. If I had to pick my favorite conventions, I would say, well, I'm prejudiced. Having founded SMOFCon 40 some odd years ago, I sort of like that. BosCon in the Boston area, which I chaired again a couple of decades ago, and have been working on since. And just for a contrast in size, I really, really like DragonCon, which is orders of magnitude larger than the other conventions that I've mentioned. But DragonCon, if you are interested in anything related to in the genre or anything related to the genre, you will find something of interest to you at DragonCon. On the other hand, it is also going to be in the middle of 80,000 people, and many of them are many of the things that are going on there are almost likely to be not the things you're interested in, because 80,000 people have 80,000 different things that they're interested in.
in Atlanta at the end of August, early September.
There is that.
Atlanta Labor Day weekend.
Oh, sweat.
I write under the name Wayland Smith, unless you really hate this panel, and then my name is Jim Butcher. Jim knows I do the joke, and as penance for the joke, his new book is out this week. You should go check it out. Not that Jim needs my help. I did a couple of cons back in the mid-90s, took a break for a while. I've been doing cons pretty steadily since 2010. I was retired from my main job just over a year and change ago. And the con world is a small world, and people found out I had retired, and I'm now going to a lot more cons because people are like, hey, you're not doing anything, come here. I will also say Dragon Con holds a very special place in my heart. Dragon Con is my one must event every year. I made it in 2023, 3 days after I simultaneously tore and dislocated the meniscus in my left knee, which I was not aware you could do. But if I made it that year, I'm gonna keep making it. Dragon Con also, through a very bizarre, unlikely chain of events, which I will bore you all with, pretty much launched my writing career. So Dragon Con has always been very special to me. It's also, despite our very hectic and conflicting, often work schedules, Dragon Con is the one event every year that my wife and I both get to go to together pretty much no matter what. So it's the high point of our year, and I absolutely love it. I've really enjoyed a lot of other cons, and I'm still getting a feel for some of the others as more invitations roll in. This is probably my third or fourth MarsCon, and I gotta say I'm really enjoying this one. I also really enjoy Raven. I hit FanX Salt Lake for the first time last year, and it really impressed me. I'm definitely going back to that one. That one is also on par size probably with Dragon Con. It's huge. It's a convention center that takes up an entire city block. And the dealer room is probably the size of this hotel. So yeah, there's a ton of variances in sizes and attendance and whatever in cons. And in a lot of ways the size, here we go with cliches, the size doesn't really matter. It's a lot of the people running it and the people that go to it. So, with our topic being what it is, and we'll start with Ben and work down, before we weigh in on our cons dying, why do you think some people are saying that?
A couple of reasons. The first is that a whole bunch of conventions have died over the last 5-6 years.
True.
Basically, COVID meant that everybody had to go on hiatus. A bunch of conventions did not recover from going on hiatus. You ended up losing conventions as old as MidwestCon, which started in 1950. It went on hiatus. It hasn't started up again. It's not likely to. And MidwestCon is really easy to run because MidwestCon was the original Relaxicon. MidwestCon has no program, no art show. It's got about a half dozen people who are in the dealer's room. But it was still too much. It was still too much to go deal with the hotel search problem. So we've lost MidwestCon. We lost LunaCon less than a decade ago. LunaCon started in the mid-50s. We lost LunaCon. We are likely to lose WesterCon, which is the third oldest convention that we have after PhilCon and the WorldCon. WesterCon started in '48, and at the business meeting at the last WesterCon, we voted to shut it down. Now that will have to be ratified at next year's WesterCon, but as I say, we are losing a whole bunch of really old, very well-established conventions. So the question is a not unreasonable one to say, are we losing conventions? The answer is we are losing conventions. Now, we are getting more conventions, we are getting conventions starting up. The failure rate for starting up a convention is not easy. Believe me, it is not easy. When we started MarsCon, my co-chairs and I sat down with our personal budgets and said, okay, if nobody shows up, can we afford to pay the bills out of our own pockets? Because when you're starting up a convention, that's what you've got to be prepared to do. Starting up a convention is dangerous, it is risky, and the reward for it is you've got another really neat convention if you're doing it right. But we are constantly getting new conventions, and with luck, the net is going to be, we will continue to have conventions.
Okay, good. Mark, what do you think about the overall question?
So I think the question comes up not just because we lose conventions, that is part of it, but also I think it's easy to see as somebody who doesn't run a convention that some of the pressures that might be shutting down conventions are getting a little higher. Prices are going up. Sked has become obscenely expensive. Eventbrite has become extremely expensive. Hotels have become obscenely expensive, and I've figured out that one-day events give them more money than three-day events. 3 one-day events are much more profitable for them. So there's all sorts of pressures on conventions right now that I think is setting up a condition where we could start seeing conventions going away at a net negative rate. The ones that die won't be replaced by new ones or reorganizations or that sort of thing. So I think that's why the question's being asked, is because it's easy to look around and see how are they surviving, or start to ask the question, how are they surviving? That's what I think, anyway.
I haven't run, well, okay, let me rephrase that a little bit. The closest I've come to running a convention is I ran a very small writers retreat a few years ago, which was an interesting experience, and I thought a one-shot, and I've not stopped hearing about when you're doing the next one since. So that will be coming back at some point. But since I'm not really involved in the running side of a con, although I've attended many and been a guest at a great deal, I can see why people would see that and be concerned about it. And I also, from my point of view at least, again, being a semi-outsider, I think there's probably a little bit of an element to it of just, we're seeing a generational shift in who's running them, and there's probably a little bit of the whole, hey, you kids, get off my lawn, things are changing, this generation isn't doing things the same way, which is understandable, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're going bad, it means things are going different. And change is scary. And in addition to the cost things, I'm going to try and tread very carefully here, so please bear with me. There are some things that are hitting a more divisive point than I think at any time in our history since about 1863. And it is sometimes hard to not even necessarily make everybody happy, but have everybody agree to, like, we're here for a couple of days, chill out, let's not be at each other's throats. And I think there is absolutely an element of that in con running, which is among the many reasons that I don't think that's an area I personally am going to get into, because I admire you guys, and I think it's amazing that you pull this stuff off, and I'm not really sure that's the lane I want to be in. Actually, we're going to do a little bit of, this is going to be a very sort of free-form thing, so the nature of the question. Does anybody have any questions or comments on what we've said so far? Sorry.
Yeah, I noticed a interesting trend in Montreal. Concept, the old convention there, closed down. It was one of the best I've ever been to. It got replaced by scintillation. Scintillation is if enough people sign up for it as a crowdsource situation, the con happens.
That's an interesting model.
Joe Walton runs scintillation in Montreal. It is basically it is a a method that I've only seen there so far.
It's Schrodinger's convention.
And the interesting question that Montreal is going to have to find out over the next 2 years is the WorldCon is going to Montreal. Again, what effect is that going to have? Having the WorldCon in the city sometimes really stimulates.
It doesn't.
Sometimes it stimulates, sometimes it is neutral, sometimes it tears the fandom apart.
Concept that
And
didn't year out.
Exactly. The last Montreal WorldCon was not good for Montreal fandom. On the other hand, modern Boston fandom really sprang out largely from the successful 1971 WorldCon in Boston.
I had the privilege of going to a very large mystery and thriller con this past year for the first time ever. And because there is so much planning that goes into a con and you can't predict the future, this past year they were in New Orleans. Next year they are in Calgary. A great many writers have said, I'm sorry, I can't go due to the way certain events are these days. I'm not doing international travel. And normally Calgary would be a wonderful place for a convention. And I'm one of them. I'm not going back next year because I know there are some people who take a dim view of some of the things I have said and done. And I'm not doing any international travel for the foreseeable future. And that's one of the challenges they have with running cons at this point. You can never predict the future, but right about now, I'd say the ability to do so is even less than it's ever been. And I can imagine the curveballs getting thrown at you guys, the stuff popping up. When I actually, Mark's part of MystiCon, which is coming back this year for the first time in like, what, 6 years?
Yay.
Which I'm thrilled about. I'm gonna be there next weekend, it's gonna be a great time. My first MystiCon was the last one before COVID, and you know, that image of Indiana Jones sliding under the stone door. Went to MystiCon, came back from MystiCon, and pretty much the COVID shutdown started like 2 days after I got back from MystiCon.
Yeah.
And that was still at the point when none of us really realized what was gonna happen. So, aside from the fact that I also got to meet Larry Niven, which was phenomenal, MystiCon is permanently imprinted on my brain. It's like, go to MystiCon, world changes. So, if anything weird happens after next week, my apologies in advance. I don't think it's me. I really don't.
And you talked about the replacements of cons. Some cons go away and others come back. You brought it up, and so did you. But I think part of what's driving that as well is that the business behind cons has had to change several times over the years. There's a big change in the 90s, and was another big change, and I think we're right on the precipice of yet another big change in the business of conventions. Go ahead.
Part of that comes from a very obscure thing in American tax law that changed when you talk about the change in the 80s. The tax law, the U.S. Internal Revenue Code, the changes in 1986 changed the world for hotels. Prior to 1986, hotels were in the business of losing money. It was their job to lose money. You may ask, why were hotels in the business of losing money? That seems really strange. Well, the answer is simple. Hotels, prior to the tax law changes, were typically owned by people like a consortium of doctors or dentists or lawyers or somebody like that. And they were making a lot of money. They were looking for a tax loss to offset all the money they were making, so all the money they were making as lawyers could be written off against the losses in their hotel business. The tax law changed in 1986 because what they did is they divided income and expenses into active income and passive income. And owning a hotel was considered passive income or expense. And while prior to 1986, the tax law changes, it didn't matter. When they changed the tax laws, they said passive losses can't be used to offset active income. So suddenly, all these doctors who had been spending years telling their hotel guys, I want positive cash flow and I want a tax loss to write off against my practice. Well, 2 years later, when they're the tax change is passed in 86, goes into effect in 87. In 88, their accountant goes and tells them, remember those giant tax losses? I couldn't use them. At which point they go tell their hotel managers, you remember we told you to lose money? The rules have changed. You've now got to go make money.
And if anyone needed any further proof that the American tax system doesn't quite work, there you go.
And so in the late 80s, early 90s, it used to be that a dealer room would pay for your venue and all you had to do was fill hotel rooms, and so tickets were very low priced. And then that had to all change. The attendees ended up having to foot more and more of the bill for the venue and that kind of stuff. And then in the early 2000s, all the software stuff became, oh, we can make a business out of this. Eventbrite can make a business out of this. And Sked can make a business out of this. And those rates have been going up. Eventbrite rates have almost doubled in the last 6 years. So it's gone from somewhere in the neighborhood of $265 for a $40 ticket to almost $6 for a $50 ticket. And so every time money starts to have going a different direction, you have to start paying more for the venue. It's got to come from somewhere. And so I think we've hit a point where the value for money it's started to hit a place where it's not quite there anymore, and we've got to figure out something else again, like we did in the late 80s and again in the 2000s.
Yeah, although fortunately, fandom is full of software people. It's been that way since the very beginning. There are open source registration software packages. There are open source, the equivalent of Sked. Basically, they're all open source, they're all free. Now, for registration, you're going to end up still paying money to your credit card processor, but it's a lot less than you would pay to Eventbrite.
Yep, 2.6% to most credit cards.
Exactly.
One of the things I've noticed at some of the smaller, maybe really, really local cons, I'm also going to do my best to not give bad press to different cons, so if I skip a name, there's a reason. But what I've noticed at a couple of the smaller ones that I've been to, for lack of a better way to put it, if I am the youngest person in your room, you've got a problem. Because I'm not that old, but I'm certainly not in the younger demographic of con goers at this point. So I would say that is something that a lot of cons need to find a way to adapt and address. And I've got a few thoughts about that, but I'm going to save mine to the end, or at the end of this go-around. Mark, what do you think about that? What do you think they should maybe do to shift the demographic if they can?
So I do think that the demographic is shifting naturally, but it's shifting into different places, and those opportunities for them to do stuff like that are in different conventions. So some of the smaller conventions aren't pulling in the young people because they're not programming what the young people want. They're not hitting the animes, they're not hitting voice actors, they're not hitting YA authors and that sort of thing, which was something you didn't have to do in the early 2000s because adults drag their kids places. Adults don't drag their kids places anymore. Their kids are now making more and more decisions about where they're spending money And it's not, no offense, to come see you.
No one, at this juncture in my career, no one is going to a convention to see me. I'm very realistic about that. I'm a little known, I'm working my way up, I do think I'm making progress. If I'm your draw, again, you've got a
But
problem.
it's not so much that me. There are people that come to conventions to see me, but it's not 18, 19, and 22-year-olds. You do have to make sure that your programming is hitting that sort of thing. Also, involving them into your com and your volunteers and that sort of thing will also help get people to your convention. Allowing young people to come to something that's kind of fun for free because they volunteered for 12 hours is actually a good way to get them in the door.
Absolutely.
They get their friends in the door. And a lot of conventions have been resistant to bringing in 17, 18, and 19-year-old volunteers. They would prefer 30-year-olds that they're more reliable. So it's just, I think we've got to get them in to help them to run the con at an earlier age. We do need to adapt our programming. Programming, I feel like, doesn't adapt fast enough. Then we also have to make sure that we are providing something that 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds are going to have fun doing.
Couple of things. The first is that, of course, when conventions started, basically, fandom was the only place for people like us. If you wanted to talk to people who were interested in SF, well, you could talk to them through your fanzines, or you could see them at conventions, or you could go to your local club. But all of those were considered a part of fandom. And now you've got all these other venues where people like us can hang out. So we aren't the place where you gotta go to meet us. As for the generation change, that's also true. Partially, that is a reflection on what is going on in society. There was a recent study which was actually quoted at another panel I was on recently. On 50% of the people in this country read less than a book a year.
Which is just depressing.
Yeah.
Which is just depressing, but what it means is that the average fan, when I started going, was reading dozens of books every year because that was how many were being published. But you're not going to be able to reach, if you are a literary-oriented convention, you're not going to be able to reach people who don't read. So yes, you need to say, well, can I run a convention for the half of the population that is reading many books a year? And the answer is, you can. You absolutely can. Or you can say, well, I want to be able to reach the people who aren't reading a book a year, and let me add a manga track or anime or some other thing other than books. And that's, again, a perfectly reasonable choice. What you need to do is decide, what is it that you want your convention to be? Because, quite frankly, if you're going to take your volunteers, which are always in incredibly short supply, basically, the convention you want to run has to be a convention you want to go to. If it's not a convention you want to go to, it's too much work to do. It's a lot of work to run one of these things. It is, hundreds and hundreds of hours for the senior staff. If the convention that they're spending hundreds of hours working on isn't one that they'd be interested in going to, they're gonna say, why am I doing this? So what you need to do is say, what are the things I'm interested in doing? And what are the things that I'm interested in doing to attract sufficient warm bodies? And by the way, sufficient warm bodies does not mean you have to be DragonCon size. You've got conventions, you can make conventions work at any size. It gets trickier as you get smaller because, as was mentioned, hotels are getting more and more expensive. And that's a fixed cost. You've got to amortize your hotel costs over the people who you're going to be amortizing it over, which for the most part is the attendees. Yes, you can try and get some of it back from the dealers, except for the fact that the dealers won't come to your convention if you don't have enough buyers at your convention for it to be worthwhile for the dealers. So in the end, the question comes down to how many people want to come to your convention, and is that sufficient? It means that for the most part, most conventions, certainly in the major cities, tend not to be in the downtown, really expensive hotels because we can't afford them.
There's a truism in writing that you can't write to a trend, because by the time you've written the book, the trend will have passed. You can sort of do that with programming. You've just got to move quickly, be agile. One of the things that I would suggest for some of the cons, like lit RPG is a fairly new writing genre, and the people that are into it are really, really devotedly into it. And I'm noticing at a lot of the cons that I'm going to, especially a lot of the smaller ones, there's not really anything for that. So that sort of thing is something that like con directors or track directors or programmers, I would argue should probably take a look at. As just sort of, okay, what's going really big right now, and how do we, for lack of a better term, cash in on it?
And I would split that up very much into two categories. There's what is TradPub doing and what is the indie small press market doing. Because quite frankly, they are very, very different markets from a publishing viewpoint.
That's certainly true.
And if the hard thing is that most of the programming directors at most conventions tend to be reading, for the most part, TradPub stuff, because that's what they grew up reading, and they're still reading TradPub. I'm using book jargon. TradPub means essentially traditional publishing, what the big five, the major New York publishers, and to a certain extent Bain as well, even though Bain is not a New York publisher and has very, very different modes of operating than the New York publishers do. Bain has the advantage of their ownership is not a, if you take a look at Tor, which used to be owned by Tom Doherty, but is now an imprint of Macmillan, which is an imprint which is controlled by the corporation that owns Macmillan and Macmillan UK, which is then owned by a German publisher. So Bain has the advantage of, you used to be able to say, if Jim Bain likes it, it's sold. Now it's, if Tony Weisskopf likes it, you can sell it. But TradPub is generally what we all grew up reading, and finding programming people who read a lot of indie, who read programming directors aren't going to invite a lit RPG person if they don't read lit RPG themselves.
Well, maybe that's one of the things we need to look into is getting some better advisors for the programming directors. I know some of you all have comments. I'd like to hear from some of you.
I was just gonna kind of piggyback off the, like, you say, like, the people in the room don't know, other than maybe the traditional publishing, like, I think the question would be, how do we get these unique or different perspectives in the room of these cons? Because I've been going to cons since I was a teenager, and it's definitely changed over the years, especially as a female going to some of these conventions that are hard sci-fi, fantasy, etc., that tend to be more male dominated. But like, how do we get those different perspectives in there when, like, I would have no idea how to get in there to get my opinion in there, like what I would want to see, what I would want to do.
Every convention is looking for, every convention that is going to be even moderately successful is always looking for volunteers. Every convention that is moderately successful is always looking for people to give input into the process.
Like, but how do I find that?
Go to whatever con that you're interested in,
Yeah.
go find the people that are running it, and say, hey, I'd like to volunteer.
You're
And
gonna,
then essentially, you can infiltrate the con, and start making your suggestions. Hey, you should look at this, hey, you should talk to this author or this seller.
at the closing ceremonies in an hour, they're going to be talking about next year's convention. The chair of next year's convention is going to be up at closing ceremonies. Walk up to her and say, I'm interested in providing some input. I'd be glad to help volunteer. What do I do? And the answer is, she will tackle you and say,
The other thing that surprises a lot of people, and I've been getting hit with this over and over again recently, because I keep forgetting I've got an inside track on some things, a lot of cons are also frequently looking for guests. And you don't necessarily need to be a published author, you don't necessarily need to be a name. My first two panels that I was ever on, I was drafted onto both, I was not asked, and it was at a point when I think I had maybe one short story published. It was, I knew the source material, and I had come to somebody's attention by just being at the con. So that's another way you can get in there. And then if you're a speaker, they almost always want your feedback.
Yeah.
And you can go, hey.
Because I was going to put in for be a speaker or something like that, but I didn't know what they would accept or what they wanted. So it's like
A warm body.
You will absolutely not get to be one if you don't ask.
Yeah.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
There are flyers up all over the hotel now with a
Oh, yeah,
QR code saying, hey, please provide your input.
Mhm.
And I'm sure if you just went to that QR code, you could provide input that way.
Yes, ma'am.
I still think there's a failure to capture people from the outside. The
I'm
only
sorry,
reason I
can you
know
speak up
about-
just a little? I got a heater in my ear here.
I'm sorry. I think there's a failure to capture people who are already outside.
I
The
agree.
only reason I know about MarsCon is because I've been coming 20 years and someone told me then about it. I've still never seen an advertisement
Correct,
about
yeah.
it.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
filter
no one
out
ever knows.
Right.
about it.
And so if, like, when it's stationary conventions, when I hear about those, I hear about them on TikTok, I hear about them on YouTube, and I book tickets immediately, and those things sell out in 5 minutes.
A stationary convention? I was wondering about her.
Baltimore Pen Show, DC Pen Show, Florida, LA.
I have
sell
learned
out
something.
immediately.
Yeah.
And it is typically a wide range of people, 18 to 80, and we're all there, we're in there, but they all are on social media.
Yeah.
And when a very popular 22-year-old girl says, oh my God, Sailor just put out this new fountain pen, go get it now. People can put money
You
down
don't
for it.
wanna think about just how much some of the high-end pens sell for.
Oh, no, I will lead you to them.
Yeah.
Okay, that is definitely going in my next novel.
Right now,
We both,
tonight,
yeah.
there's a new Game of Thrones, and that has not been mentioned once at this convention. And that is huge. It's huge.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, definitely,
So, you're right. There's absolutely always going to be a gap between, one, what the programming director happens to be up on, and the thing at large. The other thing is, we take a lot of our programming ideas from our guests. Sometimes guests will apply without filling out that block. Other times, those blocks were filled out 6, 8, 10 months ago. They started doing programming 10 months ago, and once you pull the trigger and say, hey guests, here's the programming guide, once you start changing a whole bunch of stuff out, it starts to become a nightmare. Where'd that panelized sign up go for? That sort of thing. So at a certain point, you have to sort of put a pin in it and say, I know something big could happen. Stranger Things could come out and tank, or it could come out and do great, but we can't have more than 2 Stranger Things panels, or whatever decision that you make. But you're right, in a world that is used to the 2-week trend, having a 10-month process to do programming can make it feel like it's a little old, and we need to figure out a way to do that. We need to have a little bit more meta programming, maybe. There's a way, there should be ways to do that, but we haven't, as a group, at least in the 15 to 20 cons that I go to in a year, figured out that 2-week turnaround on trends.
if you know what the magic formula is, please share, because lots of people would like to know that.
One of the things to keep in mind is that for a lot of conventions, they get more people who are applying to be on program than actually will fit.
No, that's what I was
Which means that in general, what they start with is, well, these are the people who came, who I had on the program last year. 3 or 4 of them have said they won't come, so I can add 3 or 4 more people. But it wouldn't be polite to take somebody who's been a guest at this convention for the last 5 years and say, hey, we don't want you anymore. So getting that kind of turnover is always a tricky process. I'm not saying it's not possible. It absolutely is possible, because you're gonna have people who aren't coming back, even if you invite the same, even if you invite all the people who you had last year, some of them won't come back. There are always openings. And the important thing is for the programming staff to be able to say, okay, I've now got 3 more program slots. Lit RPG is hot. Let's see if we can find 3 Lit RPG people and put them onto the program this year.
There was a fairly small con that was scrounging for guests at one point, and I heard this story a little while ago and it made me laugh my head off. Their timing ended up being beautiful, because just as somebody was starting to break with one particular book, they were scrabbling for guests. So this author, who no one had heard of at that point, called Matt Dinneman, said, hey, I'll guest if you want. And they hadn't heard of him, but they're like, people, sure, what the hell? And that's right about when Dungeon Crawler Carl really broke. So that con that year got a really both nice and somewhat difficult surprise of, okay, this is our audience and we know roughly what to expect and we're hoping for more, to, okay, this is our audience and how do we handle this? Because there's always going to be an element of timing and of something developing that you're not going to be able to predict. And sometimes that works great for you, and if you're featured guest is, let's say, a formerly very well thought of fantasy writer from England who suddenly has a lot of really unfortunate things coming out, and they're prominently listed on all of your literature.
Ooh.
You've really hurt yourself, but there's nothing you can do about it. Yes, ma'am.
This is more of a gripe than anything else. I go to cons except for now. I used to be a dealer here, I'm a dealer at other places, and I have been steadily losing conventions because they're not happening for various reasons. But there's a mindset which is completely unfortunate that we must be the Roman legionaries standing to defend us from the barbarians who are anybody who don't concentrate on trad publishing. In other words, God forbid we should have RPG. God forbid we should have anything that interests somebody under 30 because we're pure. And there is absolutely no way to counter that.
I think that unfortunately is going to become a self-correcting problem.
Oh, it's about to, yeah.
Because there's a lot of truth to the whole thing about adapt or die.
Yeah, pretty much.
And the ones that absolutely steadfastly refuse to change are going to steadfast themselves into obscurity. John?
I know one of the issues with RavenCon for years was a businessman bought all the hotels in Richmond, and he just didn't like having conventions at his hotels. So Richmond had, RavenCon had to go to Williamsburg for most of a decade.
Yeah.
How much is the lack of event space or even that post-COVID changing with hotel businesses impacting conventions?
I will defer to somebody who knows much more about that than I do.
We all here know a convention that fell to that exact thing. Convivial is not happening this year because its space got converted into low-income housing after they'd already signed the they got their money back and everything like that, but after they'd already signed the contract. And it takes time to find a venue, and there are fewer and fewer venues left. Not only are there fewer and fewer venues left, but the venues that are there have different business models than they did 10, 15, and 20 years ago. It used to be you would clamor to have a 3-day event, to fill up a hotel for 3 days. Now they found out that instead of charging, we'll just use nice round numbers, instead of charging $5,000 for a weekend, they can charge $2,000 a day, clear an extra $1,000, and not have to put all of the food service and all that kind of stuff together. They have a wedding, they have a 1-day symposium, they do all these other things, and they can make more money. Their business model has changed, and they're less willing to work with you. They're now less willing to make deals. If you fill up the hotel, you get this much off. Instead, if you fill up the hotel, we'll give you X number of rooms for free. Everything's changing in the venue space, and it is really affecting us. Cons have tried going back to civic centers, which is where they started, and that hasn't worked out as well because people want to have an attached hotel or an association. And that sort of thing is unfortunately why I think some of the bigger events, the ones that draw 15 or 20,000 people over 3 days through a vendor room, are doing a little better now financially than the smaller cons are.
So if any of y'all hit that Powerball thing this weekend, what you need to do is build a really big hotel with really good conference spaces and then start reaching out to people like us.
Although, again, to look at a somewhat contrary viewpoint and in part agreement. The in part agreement is that there have been two things that have happened over the last half dozen years that have substantially affected the hotel business. COVID meant that a bunch of hotels shut down. New York City lost tens of thousands of rooms in hotels that didn't survive COVID. The other thing is that a bunch of hotels have been converted into undocumented immigrant housing. The Roosevelt Hotel, a 1,000-room hotel in New York, became undocumented housing. It's since gotten rid of that market, but it hasn't been able to reopen yet. So you've got that thing changing the supply-demand curve.
Okay.
That is transitory because you get a whole bunch of, the hotel market is a giant fixed cost market. The biggest expense at a hotel is not the food and beverage, that's low margin. It's not even the personnel, it's paying the mortgage. You gotta be able to pay the mortgage on the hotel. And that means that's a fixed cost. It doesn't matter what you have or don't have, you gotta pay the mortgage. And as people start to build hotels, they all gotta pay the mortgage, which means as they build more hotels, suddenly the market says, hi, you've gotta pay the mortgage. I can walk in and I can give, I know you're not looking desperately for our kind of business, but you've got a mortgage to pay and I can give you money. Now, am I gonna be in the ideal time for the convention? No. If you take a look at the conventions in Boston, for example.
Yeah, but
You've got, MarsCon is President's Day weekend.
yeah, you keep using big cities for the example, though. I really think that most of us go to conventions that aren't in Boston or New York.
Right,
Go to
but
Boston, I'm here now because Boston outpriced itself.
the same thing is affecting the smaller properties because the industry says, okay, I'm priced out of Boston, let me go to Worcester. I'm priced out of DC, let me go to Richmond. I'm priced out of big city X, let me go someplace else.
Right,
So
but
it ripples through it takes time.
the
Okay,
hotels
we can take one more question and then we're gonna have to start to wrap up because other people are leaving the room for the next panel. So I believe you had a question, or actually, you haven't done one yet. It's sorry
I've got
about
a comment just as a former guest presenter, et cetera, how to get people in. One thing that I noticed this year, haven't been to the con for a while, is that there's much more passive versus proactive activities. And this can help vendors, this can help attendees overall. I'm a 30-year ballroom dance instructor. I've seen many romanticon type things doing a ball. And how you would set that up if you wanted to have a true, like, not just someone in there as DJ's dance, is you have an instructional panel on the dance that you're going to do, be it waltz, something that someone with my level of experience could teach a whole room of brand new people just be able to move. Then they all get dressed up. People, you see this stuff in the one that bombed in Baltimore, where people just, yeah, if you know, you know. But you could have an event where everyone's coming for this big ball, chance to dance, chance to dress up, but you get the actual instruction earlier in the convention schedule, and you would have a massive drop just for that. I also, the reason I'm tire, I do combative arts. I have a whole entire club that could come in and do nightly demonstrations of combat or history of armor, stuff that writers would find valuable. And these can be interactive, like, hey, come take a look at the armor. Come ask questions about these things. If there were more proactive, when I was here at MarsCon, back when we did our steampunk event, the steampunk guest, I guess, the GOH, wasn't able to show up there, like, Ramirez, can you step up? I did. We had a tea where I got candy, like licorice pipes. I was like, let's all have conversations like we're smoking these pipes. I bought the candy slide whistles. We had an orchestra of candy slide whistles. You know, so the idea is that you need some guests who are going to do stuff that is fundamentally proactive rather than having people behind a table just talking about stuff, but engaging. And then people go, I want to do that again. And I've had people come up to say, why aren't we doing more of this? I'm
Okay.
like, not my problem, I'm not a guest, so, yeah.
My one response to that would be, in the town where I live, there's not a hotel that was built within the last 25 years that has a ballroom. We're stuck with the older properties. They don't, the hotels are maximizing rooms and they're minimizing event space because the events are not what they're trying to market to. And so in the small and the medium markets, even Richmond only has a couple of hotels that are conducive to events, and the new ones aren't building event space.
I'm sorry, my studio is smaller than the main convention space area. We could make that work because the way, and once again, you're not a ballroom expert, there's a path, a line of travel. So all you need to do is explain to people, this is what we do. You utilize, as a guest and a presenter, I utilize the space that I'm given. I utilize what opportunities the convention gives me to do the things I want to do. It's like, you don't have to be like, hey, we have this luxurious space. The more important thing is, give us a chance to do it, give us the time, and we'll figure out.
Speaking of time, unfortunately, we are out. So, panelists, please tell them whatever you want to know about where you can be found. Thank you all for coming. If anything gave you an idea about what to do with the convention, reach out to the convention. Where can people find you?
I'm Ojai Mark online everywhere, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, all that. MarsCon next week as one of the board members and con runners, and then I'll be at RavenCon in April as one of the con runners, and after that, I'll be at other conventions.
Just followed you.
Thank you very much.
Where will they be able to find you, sir?
At conventions everywhere.
I am some version of Wayland Smith on all of the socials. I will be at Mr. Con next weekend. I'll be at Superstars Writing in Colorado Springs in early February. And then after that, I completely lost track. So follow me online if you want to know where I'm going to be, and maybe I can find out too. I have books for sale here for the next hour or so. Our booth is the Crowded Shelf booth. It's between the two doors of the vendor room. Come by, say hi, buy books, whatever you buy. I don't have to pack up to take home. Thank you very much for coming. Hope you all enjoyed.